Egypt's fake flood and the ICJ move. What's really going on? Egypt says Ethiopia caused a man-made flood. Now it's talking about going to the International Court of Justice. But here's the thing. When you check the data, the flood Egypt's talking about doesn't even add up. So what's real and what's political theater? Let's break it down. Hi, I'm Samia Mohammed and this is Analytica Today. Last week, Egyptian media headlines claimed something dramatic. Ethiopia's Grand Renaissance Dam, GERD, had unleashed a flood that forced Egypt to open the High Aswan Dam. The coverage went further. Reports said Cairo was now weighing a legal move taking Ethiopia to the International Court of Justice. But hold on, Sudan was the one issuing flood alerts. The floods started there, not in Egypt. Going through the reports, the river data, and the physics of how water actually moves, Egypt's accusation doesn't line up with the timeline, the geography, or even basic hydrology. Let's rewind a bit. Every year, heavy rains in Ethiopia's highlands feed the Blue Nile. The surge flows through Sudan, past Sennar, Rouziers, Khartoum, before merging with the White Nile and eventually reaching Egypt. Sudan's Ministry of Irrigation issued flood alerts for Sennar, Al Jazeera, Khartoum, River Nile, and White Nile states. The warnings were clear. Rising river levels pose risks to low-lying areas. In other words, this was a Sudanese flood emergency, not an Egyptian one. Yet, just days later, Egypt reported localized flooding in Monofia and Bahria, far downstream. Cairo's media quickly pointed fingers north, at the GERD, and even hinted at deliberate water releases. But if you know how the Nile works, you'll see the problem. Here's the timeline. When water leaves the Blue Nile in Khartoum, it needs 1 to 5 days to reach Atbara. From there to Wadi Halfa, another 1,170 kilometers, it takes between 5 and 12 days. Then it enters Lake Nubia, also called Lake Nasser, a massive reservoir stretching up to 550 kilometers long, holding as much as 170 cubic kilometers of water. That lake delays and smoothes any flood peaks before they reach the High Aswan Dam. So a surge in late September in Sudan wouldn't hit Egypt's delta by October 2 or 3. It would take weeks, not days, which means blaming the GERD for Egypt's early October floods doesn't fit any physical model. So what's really going on? According to Al-Arabi Al-Jadid, Egyptian officials are now leaning toward resorting to the International Court of Justice, the ICJ. But here's the nuance. Cairo wouldn't be filing a case. It's reportedly seeking a legal advisory opinion. And that's important because advisory opinions aren't legally binding. They are political signals. Egypt may use this move to pressure Ethiopia, invoking the 2015 Declaration of Principles, which says all Nile countries must avoid significant harm. In plain terms, Egypt's saying, you're breaking the deal, but the data says otherwise. GERD operators didn't release anything unusual this season. Ethiopia actually stored less than expected due to moderate rains. So this push for an ICJ opinion may be less about water and more about narrative. Egypt wants to frame itself as the victim in global forums, keeping diplomatic pressure on Addis Ababa alive. If Egypt takes this to the ICJ, it opens the door to legal scrutiny on both sides. Ethiopia could argue that Egypt's own dam, the High Aswan Dam, has caused environmental and social damage downstream too. In other words, the case Egypt's building could also be used against it. So let's recap. The flood that hit Sudan and parts of Egypt in early October. Natural seasonal events poorly timed for Cairo's political messaging. The talk of a man-made flood, not backed by evidence. And the move to the ICJ, likely a diplomatic play, not a scientific one. But here's the bigger picture. The Nile isn't just a water, it's identity, power, and politics. For Egypt, it's survival. For Ethiopia, it's sovereignty. And between the two lies, a story that's far from over. I'm Samia, and this is Analytica Today. Subscribe, share your thoughts below. And remember, data doesn't lie even when politics do.